let's start here.
Okay.
Matrix Resurrections, like what expectations did you have going into it? Was it like you were just curious, or for me it was I just wanted them to be better than the sequels. And that's kind of the bar I was measuring them against.
I thought it was going to be great. I thought it was going to be the Cloud Atlas of Matrix movies.
Yeah.
Which maybe was too high of a bar.
What did you guys think, like, of just the like sort of the degree to which it is a knowing sequel, meaning that like it is literally a world in which a guy named Neo made a game called The Matrix and blah blah blah, and you're looking at Matrix action figures and stuff like that in the reality of the movie. Like, what did you guys think of that whole approach, and was it like jarring?
I kind of knew it was coming because I read enough ahead of time to sort of prepare myself for that. But I was kind of mad at that decision a little bit while I was watching the movie, especially the second time, because once Jonathan Groff's character mentions about Warner Brothers being the reason why this is happening all over again, like I couldn't watch it under any other lens than like, this means this means that. Like, he's a studio head, like Neil Patrick Harris is like Hollywood, Keanu Reeves and Carrie Ann Moss represent like actors over 40, like Jada Pinkett is like old directors, Jessica Henwick is like the new directors, and like I was watching it from that lens.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, but it wasn't enjoyable. And I felt like it robbed the movie of like whatever emotional investment I had, and just became like this theoretical exercise. So when I saw it the second time, I saw it in IMAX, and I'll say like I thought it made the action feel better than it did when I watched it on TV at home. But the movie frustrates me in the sense that I think like the foundation of The Matrix as a concept and as a first movie is so strong that I wish that the mythology led to something more satisfying as a narrative, because I feel like it's just been very experimental, but in ways that I can appreciate them trying, but I don't like the result of. So.
I don't want to be the person who isn't crazy about this movie, because I've seen so many people like talking about how much it means to them, and I'm like, well, that's so great that you found this thing that you love and that you can read so much into. But I thought the first half was kind of interesting because it was giving me something different from a Matrix sequel. Once it becomes more of a conventional Matrix sequel, I checked out a little bit. I just was like, oh, you're just kind of doing the stuff I was maybe a little less interested in the original two sequels. And part of me started to think like, is this a Jurassic Park situation where it's like it really was a one and done? Mm-hmm. And what we're doing isn't so much. I mean, I respect the Wachowski so much, and I recognize that like they're not just repeating the same shit over and over again, but what they're doing is like drilling down so far that I can't even see land anymore, and I don't recognize like where I'm at. And so for the first half of this, they were trying to, or I guess Lana was trying to do something different with a Matrix sequel, and I totally get what you're saying, Adam, in terms of it being more of an exercise than it being an entertaining narrative. But I was kind of intrigued in terms of like, well, this movie certainly has something to say about our contemporary movie-going landscape, and I'm interested in that because it's preaching to the choir. It's saying things that I'm totally on board with. Mm-hmm. But then we get into The Matrix and we become another Matrix sequel, and I was let down by that.
The first time I watched it, like I had that feeling where like I checked out about an hour in, and I kind of was just going through the motions, just sort of staring at the screen, and like at that point. But the second time I watched it, like even when they get to like Io, and then they're like doing all the, you know, stuff with the Merovingian showing up and all this stuff, like still I was thinking of it in terms of like, this represents this fandom industry thing, and it carried me like through the whole movie. And it just like, by the time I got to the end where it's supposed to be this big like cathartic moment of like, I am Trinity, I'm not Tiffany and stuff like that, I just wish it like meant something to me anymore. But like I felt like kind of similar to how I feel with the Jurassic Park series now, where it's like the cord has been severed, I just don't care anymore. Like it's just done. It's like whatever I was going to get out of this, I got out of it already.
I think again, like it's, as you guys are saying, like it's a movie that's like a lot of ideas, just like the sequels, the other sequels, or it's like not really concerned with narrative. It didn't really seem to be interested in replacing anything with something new or giving us a firm, like something new to latch onto. Like the fact that they kept like bringing up bullet time and how it's like, we're going to use bullet time against the audience. I'm the architect and I'm going to weaponize bullet time as a sort of inversion of your expectations. I'm used to having to think carefully about the Matrix, but I eventually just threw my hands up and I'm like, I don't think you know what you want to say.
I was fine even in like when Reloaded came out, I was a defender of that movie. And like I think part of it was just I bought into the philosophy aspect of it because I was just like, this is so like, I felt like they had a master plan and it didn't pay off in like Revolutions, of course. But like the whole time I was almost amused that like I was so into the nitty gritty of like the details of this universe and like Zion and like all this stuff like that. And I felt like there was some kind of like an emotional through line to it still. And like this, I feel like it's so haphazard with like, this is stuff you should care about, but you're wrong for caring about this. Like, and I'll say like, you know, as much as I like Carrie Moss and like Keanu Reeves and like as these characters, I don't think they're like any better than Morpheus, who they just decide like our relationship to Lawrence Fishburne as Morpheus is just that it's not important enough to like do that. He's just so easily replaceable. So like I find that very frustrating. And because I think he's got one of the more interesting character arcs throughout the entire series. And it's just like, no, only Neo and Trinity are important.
Well,
now.
and then
And it's like,
my curiosity and my frustration with that is because the reason I assume he isn't in it is because in the canon of the game that came out after Revolutions, Morpheus dies. There's the Matrix Online, which is like this like massively multiplayer online game, and one of the major events that happened, I played it for like a month, and one of the major events that happened in the storyline was that Morpheus dies, and there's this thing where they're like searching for Neo's body, and Morpheus dies. There's this whole thing where like, and I was thinking to myself, wow, did they not bring Fishburne back because in a game that no one played 15 years ago or however many years ago, they killed the character? Like they couldn't just tweak that a little bit. And I haven't seen anything official about whether or not that's the reason he didn't come back.
The only thing I read was that he wasn't asked. So it seems like they had a conception of like, this is what they wanted to do with Morpheus, and it wouldn't fit if he was back in the role. But I don't know if that's true or not.
But then the through line of the character that replaces him is so convoluted, you know.
No.
Oh, you're a subconscious. I'm a subconscious mix of Smith and Morpheus, and also we have this technology where I can exist in the real world. Like it was also like, so it was bending over backwards to mix in all this new technology that didn't need to be there. It didn't really serve a story purpose. I like the idea of the technologies merging, you know, in IO.
Like friendly sentinels and like Avatar winged creature. Like I was just like, yes, I'm on board for this because it's like goofy new sci-fi stuff. And I was describing it as like Farscape-ish and stuff. And I thought like some of the new crew members, like I like Jessica Henwick. And like I mean, like I was on board for all that stuff. I wanted something kind of nerdy, but like I think the more that we talk about it, the thing that kind of is kind of grinding my gears more than anything is just that they set up in the beginning of the movie like this is the right way to enjoy the Matrix, and if you didn't enjoy it in this specific way, then like you missed the point. And it's like, I like bullet time, I like action. I thought it was an amazingly suspenseful and thrilling action movie in '99 and ever since. That doesn't mean I'm wrong now because I didn't enjoy it for the right reason, but then I think it sort of lends itself to this, and I don't want to get into this too much, but like the conversation around the movie since it was released, where everybody's sort of policing the way that people watch this movie. And I think the movie kind of fed that a little bit more than it would if it was not such a meta thing.
Well, I saw a comment from a prominent film critic who was championing The Matrix Resurrections
Yeah.
as the antidote to Marvel, or as the antidote. Like, if you were depressed about Spider-Man No Way Home, this is the movie for you. And it's like, oh, I didn't totally connect with this movie, so I guess I'm just a Marvel simp. Like, I don't think that I am. I want to be able to enjoy both things, but one of them worked at its goals a little bit more, and its goals were, part of the problem too is like, I'm definitely holding Lana Wachowski to too high a standard, because even what we're talking about, like, I agree the movie doesn't achieve what it's trying to do for me, but a different movie, a blank slate movie, like from a filmmaker I've never heard of, that's not part of a franchise, if a movie were to come out that was trying to do all this shit, I would be championing that movie for trying to do all this stuff. Yeah. And the problem is, I've seen The Matrix, and so I know she's capable of pulling it off. And while she's trying to do something different here, I just don't think, I think we got away from the right balance of like communicating ideas visually and or through character and action, which is what the first movie is so good at. And all of the sequels can only communicate ideas by having characters sit around and explain those ideas to each other. And that's what Resurrections is doing so often. And that's what loses me, because there's nothing dramatically interesting about that.
Right. Yeah, it's not a propulsive narrative really in any way. And in fact, it goes out of its way to say like, well, we're gonna turn everything you know about narrative on its head. And it's like, all right, great, you have to replace it with something. Like, you know what I mean? You have you have to replace it with something interesting. Like, you have to, you can be a deconstruction. Like, I love The Last Jedi, but it's still, that movie still has a story that goes on. It's a propulsive narrative that does something while upending. And you mentioned like Spider-Man, and it was so strange to watch this movie, watch those two movies like in the same week, because one is just like going, like bending over backwards to give the audience everything it could possibly want. Like, we are going to just,
you guys like this? Here it is. You guys like this? Remember this? Here it is.
Sugar. Just like,
you guys haven't even seen Ghostbusters Afterlife yet, which is like No Way Home ×2.
I haven't seen that, but like this movie seems to go out of its way to tell you, like, not only am I not going to give you what you want, but you're wrong to want what you want.
By the way, I'm fine with that too, as long as it gives me something I didn't know I wanted.
That's what, right, which is what I was getting to, which is like, usually that's replaced with, and again, I hate to go back to The Last Jedi, but it gives you something different to chew on. It says like, okay, yes, this is great, but maybe you should think about this over here.
Or even like New Nightmare and Scream. It's like, yeah, you're deconstructing what you created or what you were part and parcel to being one of the originators of, but you gave me something really fun and new and different and suspenseful and exciting that works as a genre piece unto itself. Yeah. And that's what makes those movies longer lasting. And I mean, like, this is an amazing, like, if Lana Wachowski handed this into me as like a term paper and I was grading it, I would give it A++, because it's like, there's so many interesting ideas in here, but it's like, these have to hold up as experiences and not just like theoretical exercises, because that's not what, for me, that's not what movies are.
The end, I think, again, like, I did that Trinity moment at the end, and the whole thing with them confronting Neil Patrick Harris at the end, and them being this sort of power couple and like little bumblebees that fly away at the end and all that, like, I just don't, the movie doesn't build to that in an effective way to me. Like, I understand that the climax of the movie is essentially Neo trying to get Trinity to decide to leave the Matrix, and like that whole thread of like the voluntary sort of mind slavery, right? The idea that like Neil Patrick Harris is mostly right, which is that people don't really want to leave the Matrix. It's like, right, but we've made that point already. Like we made that point before. We made that point in other movies.
It's Joe Pantoliano's whole monologue in the
Joey
first
Pants
movie, and again, like, whatever.
I don't know. And like I said, I am sort of where Adam's at with it, where it's like, look, the movie's weird, and like, like Patrick, your whole thing about the ambitious failure, like all three of us, I think, agree, like the movie's it's trying lots of shit, weird as hell, and like cool, like that's cool. Like I'm not sad I watched it.
I respect that people are loving it. I respect that people are reading so much into it, because there's not many readings you can have of Spider-Man No Way Home unless you want to write a think piece about nostalgia or something. But I've stayed so quiet about it because it's scary to be the one person to be like, yeah, I don't know, it didn't totally work for me, and just be made to feel like an asshole. I don't know. So I would rather just let people love it and stay out of it,
So I don't know. Yeah, so I would totally watch The Matrix Resurrections. It's like an interesting movie, even if you don't like it. I think I'm more like, if I'm rating us like 4 stars, I'm like, it's like 2.5, but I just can't get over the top of liking it.
Yeah, I feel like I'd stick it kind of between, what's the second one called? I have all these R words in my head: revisited, reloaded, and revolutions.
Yeah, that's where I'd be at.
Because I think Reloaded at least has that freeway chase and like has cool shit that functions as like interesting cinema in addition to a bunch of crazy ideas and stuff. And this never really is viscerally entertaining in any way. It's just a lot of dialogue, which again is fine. It's just like not
a propulsive narrative in any sense.
Yeah.
Adam, what are we doing next week?
So we're going into witness protection until the fallout.
Assuming we're still allowed to do
until the fallout of this review. So no, we're going to be talking about our favorite songs from 2021 movies. So it doesn't have to be necessarily or originated from that film. So like there's cuts from Licorice Pizza or Last Night in Soho that are oldies but goodies, but like we think their use in a certain movie just like really made us love the song, or like something that we want to go back to that scene just for.
3 words, boys. Bye, bye, bye.
Until next time.
Sorry. These seats are reserved.
They sure are. And they always will be.